This is the Recap Episode, a weekly podcast about exploring and analyzing reality TV season by season. I'm your host, Walker, and I use my social science background to investigate reality TV shows to uncover what they have to say about their cast, as well as the experiences of the people who made the shows themselves. For this week, I'm talking about a talent search competition show called How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria? This show was the first in a series of talent search competitions in the UK put on by BBC that were designed to cast undiscovered talent into leading roles into various West End musical productions, most all of them headed up by Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, the creator of Phantom of the Opera, Evita, Cats, Jesus Christ Superstar, so many other shows. Format-wise, the show has a lot in common with Pop Stars and Idol, both British talent search competition shows that would later have their formats adapted into American Idol in the States. And when you watch How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, if you've watched any of those, if you're coming from the American perspective and you've watched American Idol, it seems very, very familiar. It feels like you've been here before. Now, that is to say that I won't have anything to say about it. I actually have quite a lot to say about how this show treats its contestants and also its judges, particularly through kind of these somewhat edited storylines. They don't quite exist in the same way as other reality TV shows because this show, once we get past auditions, has a lot of live performance aspects and live shows, but there's a lot of very interesting decisions made that I think reveal quite a bit about making and watching reality TV. Now, before I get into talking more about the show and where it came from and then recapping what we got to see, I will say that you can watch most of How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria? It is uploaded onto YouTube in various different places. Some people have made some assembled playlists of it. There does seem to be that a few episodes are missing. I guess you could currently call them lost media. The third episode, which would be the last part of the audition sequence, and then week number 4 in the finalists competition during the live shows and the public votes is not online. However, the playbill.com website has some very mediocre summaries of it, so you could go read those as well to also pick up kind of what you'd miss by not seeing those episodes. I tried to use those summaries to fill in my knowledge of the missing episodes, and like I just said, they were a little mediocre. Sorry about it. So really, what is this show? Where did it come from? Well, to kind of explain part of that to you, or at least to start to do that, I'm just going to quote directly from Andrew Lloyd Webber a little bit, but also our show presenter, host, narrator, Graham Norton, a very young Graham Norton, I should add. This was 2006. Graham starts off the show, the very first episode, explaining that Andrew Lloyd Webber is a British institution and the most powerful man in theaterland, and he has a major problem on his hands. He's about to cast the biggest show of the year and taking the biggest gamble of his 30-year career. He's looking for a leading lady for a stage production of The Sound of Music, and he's got a very specific ideas of what his Maria should be. And we get one little quick line from Andrew Lloyd Webber here, who, honestly, I might just start calling him ALW, just going forward. He says that he believes all the productions of Sound of Music in the past have cast a girl that's way too old. He wants a younger girl, he wants someone new, he wants something fresh. Graham says he wants to cast the role to a complete unknown, and he's putting his reputation on the line by letting you, the British viewing public, decide who gets to be cast. Now, all this comes from the fact that Andrew Lloyd Webber actually had a specific person in mind already to play Maria for his West End stage production of The Sound of Music. He wanted Scarlett Johansson. However, her cinematic career was taking off at this point, and that was a little more promising, a little more interesting to her, so she declined to participate in The Sound of Music. So then, of course, we need someone new. There was a theater producer who I'll get into in a moment. His name is David Ian. He had worked with Webber quite a bit prior to this, who was serving as a co-producer for this new Sound of Music in the West End. And both him and Webber together kind of came up with the idea, mostly Webber from how I understand it, of let's do a TV show to determine who to cast. And let's make it a public vote. I couldn't really find anything about this, but I'm sure maybe Webber had perhaps seen the success of shows such as Idol and Pop Stars, and X Factor was also airing at the time, and he said, let's do that. Not only would it might be interesting for the BBC, and of course the BBC will take any show that's going to pull in really good ratings, and reality competitions pretty much always do that, but also it was great free-ish advertising for Webber and for The Sound of Music. And also his other show, which wouldn't really impact the British viewing public because he at the time was putting on Evita in Las Vegas, and the Americans couldn't have watched this, but, it kind of bolstered up his clout a little bit by being able to do this and shout that out throughout this show. So, here we are. They said, let's make a reality competition show, and they did. Let's start at the beginning. It's a very good place to start. How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria aired from 29th of July to the 16th of September in 2006. Now, this show has 2 phases if you include the auditions. Some people, tend to watch these shows only from when the finalists are decided going forward, because that's when the public vote actually starts. But the auditions themselves can be very entertaining depending on how they are put together and edited, and they often yield some interesting things to see. I'll be covering both just because they were included, and it also does give you, if you watch the auditions, you do also get some layer of familiarity with some of the finalists, and you might like the story that is presented for them in the auditions part, making you more likely to vote for them, regardless of their actual performance in any of the live shows. The episodes covering the auditions are much more documentary style, while the episodes covering the finals are your true talent show format. By which I mean that for the auditions piece, we're mostly following around the women who are auditioning, the panel, Andrew Lloyd Webber a bit, watching them audition, later watching them practice and train for the different rounds of the overall auditioning process. And we're getting a little bit of confessional footage from panel people, as well as interview behind-the-scenes footage from the ladies who are auditioning, and Andrew Lloyd Webber as well. So the first 3 episodes of the show cover the extremely involved auditions process. Part 1 of this entire process is finding a way to select 50 women to send on to the first major phase of auditions, known as Maria School. In episode 1, after being introduced to the entire concept from Graham Norton, again narrating and presenting, we are also quickly introduced to Andrew Lloyd Webber. This, again, is a really big risk for Andrew Lloyd Webber, kind of putting his reputation on the line, because if the public chooses a Maria that is not up to snuff or the caliber that is expected on the West End and can't, make it happen, can't perform to what she's expected to do, then that is a big mark against not only Andrew Lloyd Webber in this idea for the show that it could work, but also just like his career in general. He would have put on and produced a West End stage show that isn't as good as it could have been. And Graham reminds us of that in this first episode. In the timeline of everything, in this first episode, it's currently May 2006, and we observe a meeting between Andrew Lloyd Webber and his judging panel, which I'll introduce to you now. We have David Ian. He's a professional actor, and he's serving as stage show co-producer. David Ian started out as an actor himself in UK theatre productions, including the musicals The Pirates of Penzance, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and The Rocky Horror Show. He moved on to production eventually, where he joined Live Nation when it was known as Clear Channel Entertainment, eventually becoming the chairman/CEO of the global theatrical division of Live Nation in 2005. In 2006, he founded David Ian Production, and in that same year agreed to co-produce The Sound of Music with Andrew Lloyd Webber and create this show I'm talking about now. Next, we have John Barrowman, professional actor and singer. At this time, he was likely most well known to wider audiences for his role of Captain Jack Harkness in Doctor Who, and only a few months in the future, he'd be even more well known for playing the same character in Torchwood. Of course, John Barrowman is also a very accomplished stage actor, having been a leading man in many productions before and after participating in this show. We have Zoe Tyler, who serves as the vocal coach for How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria. Zoe is a singer, actress, coach, and West End performer. She often also solos with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. She got her start in Les Mis at 20 years old, as well as being on a BBC talent show herself when she was 18, and joined the touring cast of Jesus Christ Superstar shortly after, before then moving on to performing in City of Angels. Participating in How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria was Zoe's first time serving as a judge or coach for a TV production, but she would go on to do that for a handful of other shows in the future, including another reality contest around a different Andrew Lloyd Webber production. These three are Webber's panel of his judges. The panel will eventually be responsible for selecting the 10 girls that will be moving on as finalists into the live show at the very end of all of these auditions. Again, as I mentioned before introducing everyone, we first get to observe a little lunch meeting between Webber and his panelists. During this discussion, each member kind of briefly describes what they're looking for in the auditions before they start going forward to whittle down to 200 and then 50 and then 40 and then 20 and then 10 finalists for the live show part of the program. Webber really wants a younger actress who you can believe actually does the things Maria does in The Sound of Music. He reiterates a lot early on that part of Maria's introduction to her character in the material is that she climbs a tree and scrapes her knee. And she's very much got like tomboy characteristics. In the opening song, How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, she is described as a will-o-wisp and a clown. And these are things that Andrew Lloyd Webber really, really wants in his choices. Whoever will be Maria, he wants them to be able to characterize that really well. David Ian says that Maria also really has to appeal to the general public. As co-producer, David Ian has sunk a lot of money, as he keeps reminding us over and over again throughout the entire show, into the production. So he wants to get the return on his investment. He is looking for a contestant to be Maria who has wide appeal and he knows will be able to sell tickets regularly. John Barrowman says he wants someone that other actors know that they can trust will make it happen every single performance. He is looking to find the true leading lady who can then embody Maria. And that's usually what he will be judging on as well. And then Zoe Tyler, of course, is looking for the lady with the best vocal ability and potential for her to craft into a new theater star. They have a tall task in front of them. They have to find what seems almost like the perfect woman out of a bunch of currently nobodies. In a little funny quip, Webber tells his team, she's only got to have the most fantastic character. She's only got to be funny. She's only got to be able to act, be able to sing, and be able to dance. It's that simple. It'll be easy. Solving this problem? No problem. Of course, this was the very first time a public decision competition would be used to cast for live theater. As a result, the whole idea was also really controversial to the theater world, and the show takes a moment in this first episode of auditions to flash some headlines about the competition and the reputational stakes for Andrew Lloyd Webber. To help with some of this auditions process, because I'm sure, as you can imagine, thousands of women were interested in trying to see if they can go from nobody to leading role in Webber's The Sound of Music. Casting directors were sent all around the UK to whittle down all of the ladies auditioning to send a select 200 to callbacks in London and perform for the panel. And we get to see some footage of that. We see a montage of women performing, a very pop stars or idol-esque display of auditions, although there is notably, I will say, not as much time spent on bad performances as would be seen in a show like American Idol. We get some bad, we get some good, and we get some kind of like okay, and I'm not sure, middling, weird auditions. This first episode then jumps 3 weeks forward into the search. Andrew Lloyd Webber, again, as I've mentioned previously, he has other shows that are preparing to open at this time. Particularly, he is working on getting Evita off the ground in Las Vegas. So he's in the States, and then he's also coming back to the UK to check in on this every now and then. And unfortunately for him, the news from the auditions process doesn't feel very promising and what he expected it would be. We hear some number, there's about 6,000 potentials that have auditioned, but only 100 possible Marias have been moved forward to the callbacks in London. So Andrew Lloyd Webber demands to see some of the tapes with only 3 days of this round of auditions left, and he's not really pleased with all the casting director's decisions. He simply must step in to regain some control over the process. So he arrives unannounced at the London auditions to see how things are going for himself. And we get some footage of a couple of women performing directly for Webber himself, along with the other casting directors, and also his daughter, who he brought along, and he tried to get one of the women who's auditioning, he challenged her to make his daughter laugh, and she failed. But I will point out, at this point, we meet one of our eventual finalists, 19-year-old Leanne, very, very young. She has an incredible voice. I said she sounds almost like a classic Disney princess. Her voice is very Snow White-esque in quality. Leanne shares that she taught herself classical singing in multiple languages, and Webber advises her to get some training to take that even further, but that she's on his list. So we do start getting some of these peeks at specific people who are auditioning, these kind of characters we're going to want to remember and latch onto. This is how you make the auditions part of these shows interesting and engaging and entertaining, is you give the audience specific people to latch onto who have memorable stories that are easy to keep track of, especially if you're watching things with a week separation in time, or maybe you watch auditions now and you skip the next week and you come back in the finals. This is how you make this part interesting from the reality TV side. Eventually, we finally get to move on to the 200 ladies who are summoned to London for callbacks on what I call a pretty flashy stage. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but the kind of visual iconography and design of this show was pretty high caliber. For these auditions in London in front of the panel, first of all, the panel is seated way high up, above the stage the women are auditioning on, and the women come out. It's this big open circular stage. Behind them on these kind of lit up walls, I don't want to call them displays, I think it was just some vinyl material with light behind it. We have big text where it says Maria with a question mark, big white letters on a hot pink or hot blue background. This was used a lot through a lot of the kind of visual imagery and language of the show. I thought it worked really well. The show has a really good and distinct style that I like. The 200 ladies who will be auditioning in this callback stage include ladies with no experience, some with training, and others who have already even performed on the West End. In this round of auditions, each woman performs a song of their choice for the panel, and then the panel decides who gets to move on to what they call Maria School and who does not. While the auditions go on, Graham Norton sits with some of the potentials kind of backstage before and after they perform, where they can also watch what's going on with the current performance, which also allows Graham Norton to comment on that. Graham's kind of serving there as a storyteller, a commentator, and also a shoulder to cry on, or someone to hug for, if as needed. For us and the audience and everyone, he does also again summarize the judges' goals. I'm not going to do that. I already explained that earlier. Although I will point out as we proceed through some of these, Graham starts commenting on how the judges are delivering their comments or what they're making their judgments on. Particularly, he and Zoe pick up on what David Ian is doing and how it seems, yes, he's looking for someone that will make a return on his investment into the show, but it's also pointed out that some of his judgment is coming from the candidate's attractiveness and physicality. Zoe doesn't like it, and Graham calls him a bit of a slime ball for this. And this is dragged through the rest of the show, believe me. They won't let this go, and they shouldn't, because it was kind of weird. During these auditions, we get to learn about a few other women hopefuls, Marias. We learn of one, her name is Bryony. She was rejected once for being nervous, but then she came back to try again in London, and she apparently succeeded this time. She auditions here as part of the callbacks, and it is a no. Her nerves are still way too much. It makes her voice shaky. You can tell she has low confidence. There's, then of course questions of would she be able to perform 8 shows a week on the West End stage in front of the Palladium full of audience members. But Bryony's still really positive about everything. She has a very... During all of this, we get a wonderful line delivery from Graham Norton that just says, "Meanwhile, Andrew is not happy." Seems Webber cannot leave things alone, which I definitely understand. You assign people to complete a task, and then you learn that they're not doing it the way you'd like them to, so you just have to step in. And we get to see some rough calls from the panel as the auditions go on, and they see all 200 of these women. They're getting meaner and they're getting harsher. Meanwhile, Bryony wants another shot. She talks to Graham Norton about the possibility of just going back out there and trying again, and he says maybe it could be worth a shot, and just to not have everything be piecemeal and jump around the way they did in the episode, she does go out there. She does do really, really well. They talk to her a bit. They ask her some questions about her confidence and her ability, and if she really thinks she could do this and be Maria in the show, and they pass Bryony on to Maria's school. Another woman that they focus on, her name is Kirsty. She is certainly a character. We are told that when she first auditioned back in May, the casting directors thought that she fit Webber's request to find the clown, Maria, perfectly. She's a little weird girl. I love her little like chicken feather haircut, where it's all like poofed up, kind of teased out and fringed in the back. When she first performs, she brings out this kind of strange prop that's supposed to help her out with her like nerves or something, and she also has like no shoes on. And I don't remember what she sings. I didn't note. But afterwards, Zoe asks her to sing some of Over the Rainbow. She just wants like a classic. Let's hear the soprano voice. Let's hear the pure voice. John cuts in and says that he really wants her to tone down the silliness. He tells her, go backstage, take some time, come back and be serious and try this audition again. Because he thinks she's hiding behind all of the humor and everything. And they do that. They send her off. She takes a little break. She calms down. She comes back to deliver a more serious performance. She talks with, I guess, one of the casting directors to get some advice real quick. And when she comes back, she does impress the judges this time. During the judges' comments, Zoe asks her if she thinks she's Maria and could do the show for a year with her current skill level, and Kirsty says yes, but then David Ian steps in and says she can do musical theater, but she's not Maria. Andrew Lloyd Webber really, really likes Kirsty, though. He loves her character and her attitude, but it's a no from the panel itself. Andrew also watched a bunch of these audition tapes from the callbacks in London with the 200 women, and he had some disagreements with what the panel's decisions were. So he's not convinced that the selected 51 Marias, there were 50 and Bryony earned a 51st spot with that coming back and auditioning again and again. He's convinced that maybe this is not the right selection to whittle down into the final 10 finalists. He says they're all a bit too samey. He would like to see some people who make him go, oh, that's different. So he decides to bring back some of the women that he sent home. And Graham narrates this as, once again, he takes matters into his own hands, which is so funny to me. The man in charge of all this simply cannot let these things go. He has to have his say. And again, I understand he's got a lot riding on this. It's just such a funny like plot structure that kind of just so happened to happen with this Webber versus the panel. So he calls up personally 4 of the women and brings them back, including Kirsty. The other 3 were also kind of interesting, but out of the 4 he brought back, I think Kirsty was the most interesting story out of all of them. Episode 2 is the first part of Maria School. What is Maria School, you ask? Maria School lasts 4 days and consists of vocal and drama training to prepare the ladies for 2 more rounds of audition. Episode 2 starts with Zoe, who's kind of our headmaster of Maria School, if you will, addressing the 51 potential Marias with an explanation of how this week is going to go and all of the rules and what they need to do. If a contestant makes it through Maria School, they get the chance to perform live for Andrew Lloyd Webber at the end of the week. And only 20 of them are going to make it to that point. And then half of those will be cut to get our 10 finalists. Andrew Lloyd Webber shows up. They were not expecting that. And he explains that to Graham that he is here to spy just a little bit, and that, yes, the rumor is true, he's brought some more Marias with him. So while Zoe is laying down Maria's school rules, Webber steps in, shows up, she's caught off guard. He explains to everyone there that he's brought 4 ladies from the top 200 back in the running, and we get a very dramatic set of scenes of each of these women's entrance into this big, hall room, clips of some of their auditions, and the panel comments that ended with them being dismissed, Andrew Lloyd Webber's comments about what he liked and why he brought them in. And then, of course, the highlight of his 4 saved ladies is Kirsty the Clown. Zoe, in a little confessional, said she was horrified when she saw Kirsty was saved because she simply has too much work to do to be a singer prepared for the stage. We then also get a quick little clip of some of the 51 ladies complaining and expressing concern and worry about what's going to go happen now with this twist. One of them says, do any of them even stand a chance now that it seems like Webber already has his 4 that he personally likes and saved? Then we get a big montage, mostly for the rest of the episode, of scenes of Maria's school. We meet some more of the contestants that they want us to get to know here. Specifically, we have Siobhan. She had a beautiful voice. She did great in the callbacks, but now during Maria's school, she's a little sick. She's lost her voice, and nerves are getting to her, and she's losing her confidence as well. So what's going to happen with Siobhan? Will she make it on? Siobhan was one of the ones that David Ian was also being gross towards. Just putting the full context out there. There's a contestant here with a particularly strong accent. Her name is Simona. She's from Bucharest. She's Romanian. She has a very thick Romanian accent. The panel sees that she delivers a ton of passion and she has a ton of drive and she's willing to work very hard, but they think the accent could really be a problem. And we get to see some footage of her not only practicing her singing and improving her vocal skills, but also trying to figure out this diction and this enunciation to be able to properly sing and speak the lines in clear English. Bryony, of course, is here, and she's shown struggling with some one-on-ones with Zoe. Kirsty is not having a good time at all. During some exercise, Zoe just sends her away into the garden to basically say, hey, you're pitchy, you're flat, and you're not, fixing it while we're trying to do this. She's like, so go outside, go figure out the difference between being on tune and being flat, and then come back when you figure that out so we can work with you. Kirsty's frustrated because there's not actually any teaching really going on to help her improve, more just pointing out flaws and problems. And of course, when you watch it, there's definitely kind of a tone here of is Zoe picking on her because she didn't like her originally at all? And Webber saved her. So not only is someone she didn't like here, but also it's someone who's here because Webber undermined her decision when he entrusted that to her and the rest of the panel in the first place. The second day of Maria's school, David has an acting test for all the ladies. They prepare a 30-second acting piece inspired by song lyrics that they think describes Maria's character. Don't really know what this entirely has to do with preparing them for the stage. It's a little bit of an acting thing. I guess it kind of gets a good sense of their improvisational ability and what they think it means to embody a character. In part, it was also just really good for getting footage of some of these ladies making fools of themselves, and some of these ladies doing a really good job. Two of the ones that are at least edited in a way to be a little strange are two of Webber's women that he saved, Kimberly and Lucy. I'm just going to minorly spoil this for 5 minutes in the future. They don't make it through to the finals, so I'm not really going to talk about them. During all of this stuff, it's day 2 of Maria's school again. Remember, he showed up on day 1 to announce the 4 people he brought in and then disappeared. Webber is back again because he just cannot stay away. He has to step in. He has to see how things are going on. When he arrives, he stresses with Zoe and David that he really wants a Maria that will make people laugh. And to keep that in mind when they're doing this acting test and considering the acting skills of all these contestants. Next comes the very first round of cuts. It's time to eliminate 55 down to 40. All of this is just decisions from the panel. Webber is leaving his hands off for this part, although he is still around to make sure that, quote, no one falls through the net. All the ladies stand together in a big hall, and David Ian goes through and reads off the names of the ones who are saved from the cuts. And all of the ones we've been following so far, Bryony, Simona, Siobhan, Kirsty, Kimberly, and Lucy, they all make it through. Because of course they do. This is being made after the fact. They know how to piece this together editing-wise. The final 40 here then go on to get some more intense vocal training. Zoe actually reveals here to us and to Kirsty that she was the one who saved Kirsty. She wants to kind of now maybe prove that Kirsty has what it takes to become Maria, to become a potential for the stage. We then get some secondary focus here on Simona and her practicing her English. There's a very snarky line from Zoe, and I'm going to try to deliver it the same way she did, talking about Simona. She goes, "Simona can't speak English very well." Like, that was shady. I'm sorry. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, wow, I do not like Zoe Tyler. She's getting on my nerves. She improves a bit later on, in my personal opinion of her. Not that it really matters to anyone or to her at all. But that moment, I was like, okay. Rude. Mean. We also focus a little bit at this point on a new contestant that we haven't really spent time with yet. Her name is Emily. She's a fairly intense contestant who is classically trained and was one of Webber's favorites early on. She has a little bit of an ego about her that'll get her into some tricky situations later on. Dawn, the next morning, as Graham narrates, is the day of reckoning. David has given the top 40 2 hours to prepare the title song, Sound of Music. All 40 will stand on stage and perform together as David and Zoe walk around and progressively eliminate 20 of the ladies, cutting the remaining group in half. Graham notes there seems to be a split among the 40. Those with previous vocal training are feeling really confident and that this will be an easy test to pass. Of course, Andrew Lloyd Webber is also here too, and I will point out at this moment, because this is when I put it on my notes, they have been playing the Phantom of the Opera sting almost every single time he shows up. It's a really funny bit, I think, and just when you think it starts getting old, they find a slightly new way to use it, and it remains fresh throughout the entire series. At one point, he's only like on screen for like a second, so instead of playing the whole sting, they only play like the first second of it. It's really good. We get to watch this progressive elimination from the 40 down to 20. It's very tense. There's, intense music. There's tears. There's giving up on dreams. But there's also lots of joy for the 20 that get to move forward. And of course, some of the ladies who get to move on to being this last 20 are some of the ones that we've been following. Simona, Bryony, Leanne, Siobhan, Emily. They're all in this next group going forward. The next morning, we're finally getting to the end of Maria's school, the end of this week. We have our 20 who will perform live for Webber, and also a big crowd of his friends, musical theater colleagues, critics, etc., who will all see this go down, see this final stage of the auditions, which are occurring at Webber's country home. They're performing in his chapel-turned stage, where a lot of his works have been kind of conceptualized and birthed into existence. Once they get there, Webber, being nice, immediately takes them to the pool, at which point I remembered, oh yeah, it's summer. We started in May. We're doing all this to prepare for a live show, which started in the end of July. Makes sense. So the ladies get to enjoy some time to relax by his pool, have a little bit of a break, but it's time to get to work. It's time to keep rehearsing and prepare for the major audition that'll be coming up soon, where half of them will be eliminated again. And also, this is now Webber's kind of first opportunity to actually see these ladies up close and get to talk to them. So he decides to summon them for some face-to-face meetings and some one-on-ones. This is where Emily starts to have some trouble. She's an extremely strong candidate, but now she's fallen down a bit after talking to Webber and some of the comments he's made towards her. She tries to go talk to Zoe about this, who advises her to just be humble, shut up, chill out, and just take the comments and nod and agree and move on, right? Emily doesn't take this note, nor any other notes that are given to her, and attempts to share privately with Zoe that she thinks that Webber is picking on her. We know this because even though Emily tried to tell this privately to Zoe, we got to overhear a little bit of it via reality TV camera snooping, and also Zoe just tells us in a confessional immediately after. So much for Girl Code. And in the stress of everything going down, when the cameras try to follow Emily, she tells off the camera crew to leave her alone. So things are going great for Emily. So for the final edition, each girl performs a big group number, which is a song from Evita, and then they also deliver a solo. For a bit, it seems like there is some struggle putting together vocals and choreography. There's a West End choreographer that's been pulled in a few times, and he's pulled in here again to try to get the ladies some choreography together, and it is not going well. At one point, Zoe's trying to do some vocal coaching with all of them, and he steps in to be like, hey, when you're doing this, can you make sure they also do the steps? He's like, because they sing great, and then when they start doing the steps, everything falls apart. So great. This is wonderful. We get closer and closer to the end of the week, and the final part of the audition process. Graham Norton asks Webber if he thinks some of his guests are coming just to see if this is as much of a disaster as they may think it is. Webber completely agrees. He says absolutely. But he's also very confident in the approach. It's high risk and high reward. Or it could be the biggest train crash you've seen in your life. Who knows? Now, we'll say episode 3, the final part of auditions, the last part of Maria's School, the 20 down to 10 finalists. Couldn't find a way to watch it. Couldn't find it anywhere. Read a very mediocre summary. It didn't really help me out. But in this auditions, like I said, we filter down the top 20 into a top 10. Many of the women who we've been following so far throughout the Maria School process made it into the final 20, also made it into becoming finalists. For example, Leanne and Simona and Emily are all there. There's a few others who I haven't mentioned just because we haven't been given a ton of screen time with them, such as Connie. She becomes a finalist, and I'll go over all these women in a moment. I do want to take a moment, since I said the auditions piece of this show, this program, is structured differently reality TV format-wise, just in general as well, than the live show, talent show, competition series part. One particular thing that I think is really interesting that I just want to talk about briefly is ALW's constant corrections for the process through all the auditions. You know, we saw it even back when we had the casting directors. Andrew Lloyd Webber didn't like what he was seeing and hearing, so he stepped in to try to take control of it himself for a little bit in London. Then we get to the 200 down to the 50. Webber's watching the tapes, and he's like, actually, I'm going to save these 4 girls. Then he's coming into Maria School a couple times just to make sure everyone's doing their job well and they're keeping in mind his needs and his requests for who's going to become Maria, while the panel members are also thinking of their own goals and motivations here. And then, of course, he wants to talk one-on-one with all the Marias and everything. And it makes sense, again, right? There's a lot on the line for him, financial, reputation-wise, career-wise. This is a brand new experiment. If it fails, no one will ever want to do anything like this ever again. But if it succeeds, it opens a lot of doors for different versions of this in the future. But something I find very interesting in the way specifically that the show was edited for these 3 episodes is that what this kind of serves to do in a weird way, and it's not something you kind of really think about while you're watching, but it definitely changes how you view the panel members themselves. Webber said he picked these people because they have expertise. Zoe's an excellent vocal coach and performer herself. John Barrowman's an excellent performer, and he has a lot of experience. David Ian was an actor, and now he's a producer. He knows how to work in the entertainment world, and he's worked with Webber before. These people were selected for a very specific reason, but with Webber coming in and kind of taking control again, which is how Graham describes it, whether or not those are his words or words written for him to deliver by like a producer of the show, this is how Graham is describing this intervention. He keeps saying that like Webber's stepping in to take control. Webber's stepping in to make sure things are going correctly, right? And what it does is it ends up really diminishing the capability and the competency of the panel members for the people who are watching this part of the program. What else am I supposed to believe when Webber selects these people and then he steps in all the times to kind of correct the process? Why would he do that? You know, the answer to that must then be he doesn't think they're doing it right. So even though he picked them, he's now losing confidence in them. So if Webber's losing confidence in these panel members, then why should I have confidence in these panel members? And then when it gets to the live voting part of the show, where I, a public audience viewer, get to vote on who gets to stay, am I supposed to take their critiques and comments seriously if Webber thinks that they're potentially not good enough to do the job he wants? Then why should I listen? Why shouldn't I just vote for my favorite all the time, even if the performance that week wasn't that spectacular? It's just very interesting to me that they left that in, and they left that as kind of like a structure for the storytelling for this part of the show, that here's these judges that we're supposed to kind of trust their judgment and their reputation and their experience, and yet they're always being undermined. So the second half of the show, or not half, so the second part of the program, the show, is all of the live shows. These episodes are really the same structure as we move through them all. I learned from covering American Idol that it's not very entertaining or engaging to just kind of talk about what happens each episode, so I'm going to try something a little different. But first, I want to talk to you about the format. So the start of each live show begins with a group performance of one of the songs from The Sound of Music. Then there's usually some recap, some reintroduction of the show and its format from Graham Norton, and then maybe a little banter, or, as the show progresses and there are fewer contestants, other behind-the-scenes footage. Each of the contestants, each of the potential Marias, performs a solo song, which is commented on, critiqued by the panel and by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Once we get through all of the ladies' performances, we wait for the results to come in. The text and phone lines have been open during the entire length of the live show, and the results show is broadcast shortly afterwards. During the results show, there's a secondary group number. Graham will talk with the contestants, talk about their experiences, talk about the panel and their judgments and their thoughts, and of course Andrew Lloyd Webber and get his thoughts. Then there's usually a live performance from a musical guest, and then we get the actual results of the live call-in and text-in voting from the viewing public. The results always end up with two of the ladies with the least amount of votes participating in a sing-off, which they will sing the same song at the same time and kind of take turns. This person sings one verse, this person sings the next verse, kind of thing. After which, Andrew Lloyd Webber chooses one of them to save, and the other one is then eliminated from the competition. That's the general format. The only time that it changes up is once we get to the top 7. In the episode with the top 7, there were actually 2 sing-offs and 2 eliminations to get to a top 5, and then they did the same thing the following week to get from a top 5 quickly to a top 3. The finale episode, of course, had a completely different format, as you would expect. It had 2 performances each from the top 3, and then a final performance from the top 2 for the final round of public voting. And I just want to point this out here real fast. Every time one of the Marias was eliminated at the end of an episode, or even during the double elimination in sequence during the top 7 and top 5 weeks, the entire group would sing So Long Farewell from The Sound of Music, where the Maria who's eliminated is kind of singing the parts that are not just saying So Long Farewell, and all the other Marias sing at her. And it's kind of like mournful send-off of the person who is just eliminated, which is cute, but it's also, put yourself in the shoes of someone who just got eliminated. You've been kicked off the show. You thought this was potentially going to be your big break to get a starring role in a West End production, which would then obviously probably lead into furthering your musical theater career, and you've just been kicked off. And now they also are going to make you do one last performance where you have to sing about departing, and you have to do this without breaking down. Luckily, it doesn't go on too long. It's a very quick little number here at the end of each episode, and it does cap things off, but it is just kind of the more I watched it, because I did it every episode, sometimes twice, I was like, oh, this is kind of bizarre, but it was always good. Does mean I heard So Long Farewell 9 times. I haven't really taken a moment to talk about all the other design elements that I liked. I mentioned the thing about the London callbacks with the stage design, but there are a few other things they did in the visual elements of the show that I really, really like, and I just want to take a moment to talk about, and encourage you also to go watch the show episodes on YouTube that are there to kind of see some of this for yourself and also experience it. Unlike when I watched American Idol, This I was like engaged and entertained with all the way through. American Idol for me, especially since I was marathoning it, just kind of became a bit of a drag after a while. Just watching people perform song after song after song. This felt like it had a little bit more like stakes to it, not just for Webber but for the contestants themselves. The show team, the production and the editing side did a good job of making the show entertaining, and I'm sure some of this also comes down to the fact that Graham Norton was a little bit more of a fun watch for me than Ryan Seacrest and Brian Dunkelman. But I also grew up watching a lot of British television, so I kind of really liked the dry humor, the British wit that you would expect from this, and it came from everyone, of course. So the opening intro to each episode has such a fun sequence. It has many Marias, all taking the iconic mountainous hills scene, where she's singing that the hills are alive with the sound of music, and then it kind of like does a record scratch and starts playing sort of more like an upbeat pop rock kind of sound, and the Marias start fighting each other. That's really cute. That's really fun. A good little intro. During the finals, the live performances, each of the top 10 Marias have a specific color assigned to them to help the audience keep track of who is who. This is genius. It's so good. Graham Norton also often refers to each Maria via a particular characteristic to also serve this purpose, to help the audience members remember who is who, what their kind of like main story is as part of participating and competing here, what their strengths are, or what their main characteristic is to latch onto. When performing in group numbers, the Marias wear the iconic Maria outfit. It's that kind of wide-bottomed dress, which is in their assigned color, and then they have a white apron on, which has the M ? Logo for the show in the same color that contestant is assigned. And then when the Marias are also performing their solos and their sing-off acts, they often get to wear other outfits, which are also usually in the same color theming to keep the consistency. For example, one of the contestants, Aoife, I'll go into that all soon, wears green. That's her color. She wears a green apron. One of the acts, her solo pieces, they make her wear kind of a white suit, but it has like green adornments on it. And later on, in some of the performances, she's wearing like green dresses. They kind of always put her in green. Leanne is in this kind of periwinkle color, or a lilac, and in her very first solo performance, she's not wearing the apron, but she's wearing a lilac dress. Almost a quinceañera dress when I saw it. And there's one very silly element, again, that I've mentioned it, I just want to say it again. Every single time Andrew Lloyd Webber is introduced, they play that Phantom of the Opera sting. And the best time they did it was once we got to the live show, and he kind of lost his power, at least like the very final one. They played the sting, and then it kind of like died out to represent him, like, oh, he's not as fearful anymore. He doesn't have the ability to cut people off or save them when we got to like the top 2 kind of thing. So the last thing that I will cover for the recap of the show is just the Marias themselves and what they're about, and a little bit about their journey through the competition. And then I'll talk a little bit about something that pertains, again, to editing the show, what it means to watch this show, specifically around the Marias. So our top 10 finalists. First one, and I'm just going to go in order of elimination. Laura Ciccarello. She was 26 from Milton Keynes at the time of the show. She was our Yellow Maria. She was also called the WPC Maria. WPC stands for Women in Policing. She was the intelligence officer that Webber asked if she could give up her career in that to do this, pursue her dream. She was unfortunately eliminated first. She did very okay in that first episode and did not survive a sing-off against Helena. Our second to be eliminated was Belinda Evans, at the time 28 from Somerset. She was our Dark Blue Maria. She was also called the Professional Maria. She was a singing teacher, and she'd had some class experience and some training as well. She went out second, losing a sing-off to Melise. Melise happens to be the next one eliminated, Melise Sermon. She was 23 at the time from Chingford. She was the Gold Maria, which When I saw the first episode and I saw Malise and Laura kind of like near each other, I was like, oh, we have 2 shades of yellow, which is not great. And the gold and the yellow just did not really stand out against the white aprons that well. I feel like they could have picked some different colors. That's neither here nor there. Just an observation. Malise was our sexy Maria, but interestingly, she was also a children's TV presenter. She did a pretty good job. She did okay. I mean, she made it 2 weeks in before she got eliminated again, losing a sing-off and being saved by Webber to Helena again, who participated in the week 1 sing-off. After her is Simona Armstrong, 28, from Greenford. She was Purple Maria. She was also the Romanian Maria. Simona was one of the ones we followed during the auditions. She is from Romania. She has a very strong accent that she really needed to work at improving, not only in her singing but also in her speaking, because there's a lot of speaking that Maria does during the stage show, and is a great concern. Most of her time, in terms of what judges are critiquing her on, and Webber talks about as well, is dominated by discussions of her accent. All the panel and Webber would say, like, oh, you have a great passion, you have a wonderful drive, we can tell you're working hard, but this accent is a problem. And there's people who campaign for her. John Barrowman sticks his neck out in, like, the first episode to kind of say, like, hey, we're part of the EU. That didn't age well. We should be embracing, like, all of the other cultures and people of Europe. Maybe we should have someone who's from Romania and just work with the accent. You know, we should show that it's not a problem to put on a stage production that you don't have a perfect English accent or a perfect English voice. Either way, she was sent home as the first elimination in the top 7 down to top 5, where she lost the sing-off to, again, Helena. Next is Leanne Dobinson. She was the youngest, 19 during the auditions in May, but 20 at the time of the live program, I believe. She's from Colchester. She was our Lilac Maria, also known as Baby Maria because she is the youngest. She was the one who self-taught herself how to sing from CDs in various languages, and everyone was really pushing her to, like, keep this up, keep going, you definitely have a career, you should get some dedicated training so that to complement what you've already started doing in your natural talent. Leanne was our 5th out. She lost the part 2 sing-off in the top 7 week, also again against Helena, who I'll get to Helena later. At this point, though, she had now participated in 4 sing-offs. After Leanne was Abby Finley. She at the time was 23, from Prestwich. She was Light Blue Maria. Graham called her the Tomboy Maria, which she definitely, like, filled that in. She, while she was on, had a bit of a characteristic for... She got quickly characterized as being very laid back, not only in her personality, but as Zoe would describe, in her singing performances as well. Which Zoe was really trying to get her to, like, you're going to be on stage, you're going to be performing, you got to be big, you know. Abby was really cool, I'll say. I thought she was fun. They had a lot of really cool performances. But she eventually was eliminated in round 1 of the top 5 sing-offs against the next person who we'll talk about, Aoife. Aoife Mulholland is our Irish Maria. We're also told she was a former beauty queen. At the time, she was 28. She's from Stalthill. She is, maybe unfortunately, but also some Irish pride, I guess, the Green Maria. I feel like they had to give her green, because if they gave someone else a green, there would have been an outrage, I feel. Aoife was really good. She, the entire time of her experience, was called over and over again by the panel and Webber and Graham the most, appearance-wise, the most similar to, like, Julie Andrews' Maria out of any of them. She was bright blonde hair, short cut, had a very similar, like, face structure. You look at her and you're like, that's Maria in The Sound of Music. And she did a very good job. She had a lot of great performances. She was usually struck with critiques on her dancing ability. Anytime they'd give her a piece that would require a high amount of choreography, which wasn't always, but they usually use that to kind of, like, test and push some of the contestants a little harder, she struggled to match up choreography and dancing with her singing. It would make her vocal performance a little weaker. So she lost the sing-off in the first part of the top 5. Or she won the sing-off in the first part of the top 5 to Abby. And then she lost the second sing-off to Siobhan. Siobhan Dillon is known as our second chance Maria. Siobhan was one of the women that we followed through the auditions. She had a beautiful voice. David Ian was all over her, drooling every time she appeared. She was one that kind of got some nerves get to her, and she did not make it through the cut from the top 20 to top 10. What had happened was that Emily had actually made it in, the one who had some diva moments during the auditions. Emily decided before the live show started that she actually didn't want to participate in this. She wanted to focus more on her operatic career, which Webber said, that makes sense. If you do this, this could damage your voice in a specific way that wouldn't make opera a viable option in the future. Graham tried to have a little cheeky moment where he read the note that Emily had sent to production and everything in a very snarky tone, trying to make it sound like she was above everything. But he then also apologized, so it was one of those where it's oh, that could have been really gross and not good, but okay, we're just gonna move on. So to replace Emily was Siobhan, and Siobhan made it really far. She made it to be the 3rd place. For the first part of the show, episode 1 or 2, I think Graham was calling her the second chance Maria because of replacing Emily, but then he changed to calling her the fashion student Maria, because that's also what she was known for. And they really leaned into this in the second half of the live show episodes, where she's like, I'm just a fashion student, and now look at me. She said that over and over and over again. I don't know if the production was like, hey, you should play this up, but it was mentioned quite a bit. During the top 3 showcase, if you will, she received the fewest public votes, so she was given the 3rd place, and she did not move on. There was no sing-off for her against the person who got the second number of votes. Which gives us a top 2. We have Helena Blackman ends up being our runner-up. She was the one who I've mentioned a few times already, because she participated in 4 sing-offs and was saved 4 times by Andrew Lloyd Webber. However, when we got to the end, she just could not compete with our eventual first place winner. I will say Helena Blackman was our entertainer Maria. She was classically trained since she was 12, 23 from Southampton at the time of the show. She was Pink Maria, became our runner-up, and did a very good job, and I believe she went on to have a pretty good career in theater, also some TV stuff as well. That leaves us with our final winner, Connie Fisher, the intense Maria, introduced for the first time in the finals as a contestant who so badly wants this role and wants to win that you would think it hurts. Just intense Maria. She did a wonderful good job all throughout the competition. She was constantly receiving mostly only praise from the panel and Webber. Anytime she was kind of had a down week, she was nowhere near the bottom of the pack. She was always receiving a high amount of votes. She never had to do a sing-off. So, she's amazing. She was 23 at the time of performing, from Haverfordwest, and she was the Orange Maria. Now, I went through all of the Marias so quick, and I tried to point out some things that they were kind of focused in on. Again, when you're doing live performances, especially at the start of the show, when you had 10 people who had to perform, and you had to get through the performances and the judges' comments and all the other stuff that you want to talk about, you don't have a lot of time to pack things in. As we started losing women, started losing contestants, they put more stuff in. They put some more behind-the-scenes footage of the ladies talking about their chances, talking about each other. They definitely had some interviewer producers running around and asking them, hey, what do you think of this contestant? What do you think of the other ladies here? Who do you think is Maria material, and who do you think is not? Who do you think will definitely not win, right? Very useful for the production, because they can get some good B-roll footage to use, some interview footage to use to fill in the gaps in the show, but also then they can use it to drop some little fake storylines if they need to, between some of the competitors, and be oh, hey, this person said you shouldn't be Maria. What do you think? How do you feel about that? That kind of stuff. Which is usually what Graham would then talk with the contestants about in the first half of the live show while we're still waiting for the tabulation of the public voting results. And I bring this up because there's a possibility that depending on how you watch this show, if you were like back in 2006 and you were watching it and you were one of the people who could vote, the way they present some of these behind the scenes storylines and what the women are doing could potentially lead to influencing the public vote. For example, with someone like Leanne, who was the youngest in the competition, that was kind of a constant critique for her, was these comments about like, wow, you're great, I just don't know if you have the experience. I don't know if you should be starting on the West End stage at the Palladium this early, That could potentially sway some of the voting public away from voting for her because they could agree with those critiques. They could be like, yeah, she is too young, That's kind of a harmless example. There's a bigger one that I think deserves some attention. And that's Simona. Simona, our Romanian Maria. A lot of the other Marias get a nice characteristic such as the job they do or a personality trait such as being intense or being tomboyish. Meanwhile, Aoife gets to be Irish Maria and Simona gets to be Romanian Maria. So that's a little questionable at best. Not great. Simona, she works hard. She's a good performer. And when she gets eliminated, I will say Andrew really tries to urge her to go audition for Evita, because the accent would not be nearly as much of a problem in that role. And in theory, shouldn't be a problem for Maria, but this is 2006, and people weren't really asking the question of, like, does it really matter to have an English Maria, Does it really matter to have a white Maria, potentially, right? They weren't asking these questions. We weren't that introspective. We weren't that used to critically analyzing everything yet. With Simona, though, they started planting these seeds early on. They really started being like, well, the accent's going to be really tough for you to overcome. And then all of her live performances, it was always brought up. There were even times where she was doing choreography. She performed Material Girl by Madonna and had like the male backup dancers carrying her all over the stage while still delivering a really good performance. And other women that week were just like standing and belting, Another layer of this is with Simona. In addition to the accent, and again, how like the judges' comments can kind of sway how people might be perceiving things and voting when it comes to the public vote, is that a lot of the footage that got filtered into the episodes and then discussed by Graham and the contestants centered around Simona not fitting in with the rest of the pack. The rest of the gang, all the other contestants, maybe they're like staying up late, they're partying, they're hanging out. In contrast, Simona is going to bed early. She's working on her accent, trying to improve that. She's trying to make sure she gets enough rest. And she's like on record in some of the interviews, like stating as such that she doesn't do the same thing as everyone else is doing. And some of the other contestants also make similar comments about Simona from the other side, where they're like, oh, she is not part of our group. She's not really like the rest of us. She's all these things. And I think that potentially was a sneaky ploy. This is all hypothesizing and theorizing, but work with me here. Listen to this. A sneaky ploy to influence the audience voting to not liking her as much anymore. So they'll vote for her less to stay, and then she'll end up in the bottom, at which point Andrew could save someone over her. Who happened to also be Helena, who he really liked, and that was his third save of Helena when she went up against Simona. It kind of feels like a conspiracy theory, but I could very much see it happening, because then also, like the BBC, the panel wouldn't necessarily get in trouble for at some point just having to be like, listen, the accent is a problem, we're not going to choose you, right? Because they can't. It's all public voting. So all they can do is just keep saying it and make suggestions. And if it got to the end and Simona was the public choice Maria, then Webber and Ian would have to contend with that, and I'd have to deal with it, and I'd have to figure out what they're going to do when you could tell they really kind of didn't want to. So I think putting all that footage in there and talking about how Simona is like unlikable and distances herself from the other competitors who we are all getting like so much more comfortable with in contrast. The footage they also use of Simona often tends to be kind of her talking in like almost like a kind of cold tone, while everyone else is contrasted with much more like warmer sound bites and interview footage and whatnot. So I think that they put that in there to kind of sway the viewing public away from liking her, so that the public would put her in the bottom as soon as possible, and then they could help get rid of her. So that's my how do you solve a problem like Maria conspiracy theory. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Other than that, I can't, like, this didn't really happen with anyone else in the show. You know, the closest we got, I would say, would be like Leanne with being too young. Melise, they constantly talked about like how sexy she was, to the point where there were lots of questions where it's like, well, can Maria be this sexy? Should we allow that? You know, and that could potentially have had a very similar effect where then public audiences are kind of like, no, we don't want an overly sexy Maria. Let's not do that. And I bring all that up just to kind of talk about how, like, even though this is the live talent show format, so it doesn't have as much ability from the show production side to produce a story and edit things together and make Frankenbites and all that to, like, deliver an exact line that the production team wants to deliver to tell their story they're trying to set up and manufacture. There's still, like, sneaky tricks, it seems, which I find really interesting. And I want to kind of investigate that further. I picked up this show after covering Legally Blonde, the musical The Search for Elle Woods, a couple episodes ago, which was a very similar idea. And the production of that show, the producers even reference, like, oh, Andrew Lloyd Webber did his talent search in 2006 and 2007. He did a feature one for Joseph and a Technicolor Dreamcoat. And the producers of the Legally Blonde reality show were like, oh, well, we can do that for this thing, our Legally Blonde show here in the States. And they did, and when I was watching that show, I learned that a lot of the editing that went on was specifically made to kind of make some of the contestants look bad, so that when they were eliminated, you know, the audience watching the TV show was kind of more likely to agree with that elimination and keep watching the show. Because it's when you have disagreements that you start losing viewers, you start losing the ratings, your show's not going to be a success anymore. And I think they just kind of did it started here. And that's why I picked up the show, because I wanted to go explore it. It was entertaining. It was a good watch. A lot of the performances were really good. Graham Norton is an excellent host. The panel was pretty fun. I always enjoy seeing John Barrowman. Zoe makes for a very good critique of the vocal performances themselves. I love Zoe's critiques. I initially started out not liking her. Her critiques were so wonderful, and it's what this kind of show needs, because she's talking about things like, oh, you tend to drop your jaw too low when you sing, you tend to not have an open sound, you tend to be pitchy, or you're very constrained in, like, your throat when you sing. Like, she's giving them, like, actual vocal critique and something they can work on, and then is also still working with them throughout the live shows, which is great. That's how it should be. So, all in all, good watch. I highly recommend, barring my, suspicious theory about some of this stuff still thrown in there, to find a way to edit and construct a narrative for specific contestants as they go forward. So, that was How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria? This was the recap episode. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow the pod on social media, on Instagram at The Recap Episode, or on YouTube at The Recap Episode Pod. Please rate and review and share the show on any of your favorite podcasting platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Pocket Casts, whatever you use. Helps out the show. It helps out me. Again, thank you so much for listening. So long, farewell, Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye.